Good morning, students. Today we will be discussing about the spotters, which are very important. Last class also we have discussed some of the spotters, and today some more spotters will be discussed in examination point of view. So this is the one which will be given to you in your examinations, and you have to identify this. What is this? You should be able to make out. This, as you know, this you can see here. This is the bladder, this is the urethra, and here you have the internal sphincter, and this is the external sphincter, and this is the spinal cord. So by this you can easily make out that this is the micturition reflex. This portal is regarding the micturition reflex. This reflex, it is a reflex by which urinary bladder empties when it's filled. Emptying of the bladder is mainly guarded by the internal and the external sphincter mechanism. So here you have the internal sphincter, and this is of the external sphincter. This external sphincter is being supplied by the pudendal nerve, which is a somatic nerve. Internal sphincter, this is being supplied by the parasympathetics, that is the pelvic nerve. Okay. So internal sphincter, it is involuntary smooth muscle, whereas the external sphincter, it is voluntary and made up of the skeletal muscle. This is involuntary smooth muscle, and this is voluntary. So this is the picture. We'll come to this again. So these are the parasympathetics, which is supplying the bladder. Bladder is majorly made up of a muscle which is termed as the detrusor muscle. So this parasympathetic, it comes through the pelvic nerves. We'll talk about innervation of the bladder. Urinary bladder and internal sphincter are supplied by the sympathetic as well as the parasympathetic nerve fibers. Sympathetic supply is by the L1, L2, that is the hypogastric nerve. Parasympathetic supply is by means of S2, S3, S4. This is the pelvic nerve. Majorly, this micturition reflex is parasympathetic activity. That is, major activity is being done by the parasympathetic. Remember this point. Okay. External sphincter, this is under voluntary control, which is being supplied by the somatic nerve fibers, that is the pudendal nerve. What are the characteristics of sympathetic supply? This sympathetic supply, this is termed as a nerve of filling. Nerve of filling. Hypogastric nerve stimulation, which causes relaxation of the detrusor muscle and contraction of the internal sphincter. This results in filling of bladder. So that is why the sympathetic supply is termed as a nerve of filling. Whereas parasympathetic, this is a micturition reflex, occurs mostly because of this parasympathetics. So this is called as a nerve of micturition. Important point to be noted. These are the important points. Sympathetic is nerve of filling, and parasympathetic is nerve of micturition. As this causes contraction of the detrusor muscle and relaxation of the internal sphincter. This parasympathetic supply is by means of the pelvic nerve, which causes contraction of the detrusor muscle. That is how urination occurs or micturition occurs. So contraction, it is this nerve majorly is responsible for the contraction of the detrusor muscle and relaxation. They relax. Naturally, internal sphincter has to relax. Then only micturition can occur. So a relaxation of the internal sphincter and the contraction of the detrusor muscles, which is being brought about by the parasympathetic through the pelvic nerves. This results in emptying of the bladder. So that is why this now most important. Remember these sympathetic. I'm stressing these points. These are very important to be remembered. That is, the sympathetic majorly it is responsible for the filling of the bladder, as it causes relaxation of the detrusor muscle and contraction of the internal sphincter. Okay. So what are the centers for micturition? These are most important centers. The one is by two centers are there, that is the spinal centers and the higher centers. Spinal centers, these are located in the sacral and the lumbar segments, and this is being controlled by the higher centers of the brain. Higher centers, here you have two centers, that is one is in the pons, the other is major responsible area is the pontine region, pons. The other center is in the midbrain. So higher centers, we have two areas, that is one is in the pons, the other is in the midbrain. This pontine region is facilitatory center, and whereas this midbrain is the inhibitory center. So how this micturition occurs? How this micturition reflex is being elicited. There are stretch receptors. Whenever the bladder is being filled, what happens, so the bladder, it will be stretched and these receptors will be stimulated. So these stretch receptors on the bladder wall are activated, and sensory signal is given to the spinal centers through the sensory fibers of the parasympathetic nerve. This parasympathetic, again, that is the pelvic, which consists of both sensory as well as the motor fibers. It is responsible, it carries the afferent impulses as well as the efferent impulses, that is occurring through the pelvic nerve. So whenever the bladder is being filled up, so what happens whenever this bladder is getting filled up, that is being sensed by the stretch receptors which are present here in the bladder, and this information will be carried through the sensory neuron, that is a parasympathetic, that is a pelvic nerve. This will be carried to the sacral region of the spinal cord. Okay, again the information here, interneurons will be playing a role, and that information will be again being carried to the motor. This is the efferent pathway, motor part of the parasympathetic neuron, that is again the pelvic nerve. So these two components, they constitute the pelvic nerve. Okay, from the afferent, that is the sensation being sensed by this nerve, that is the sensory part of the parasympathetic supply, that is the pelvic nerve. Stretch receptors, these get stimulated, that information is being sent to the spinal cord. Again from there, the efferent information goes to the detrusor. This information causes contraction of this detrusor muscle. So causes contraction, that is how micturition will be elicited. And you have again to the internal sphincter. Here it causes relaxation of the internal sphincter. That is how micturition occurs. So that is how pathway of the micturition reflex. This is important. The stretch receptors on the bladder wall are activated. Sensory signal is given to the spinal centers through the sensory fibers of the parasympathetic nerve, that is the pelvic nerve. A reflex arc is produced in the spinal cord, and motor signal is given to the urinary bladder through the motor fibers of the parasympathetic nerve, that is the pelvic nerve. So you remember this. Major activity is being done, micturition activity is being done by this parasympathetic, which has two components, that is the sensory component as well as a motor component. Afferent information, that is the filling up of the bladder, is being carried through the pelvic nerve. Again return, the efferent information is also being carried through the pelvic nerve. So pathway of micturition reflex. Parasympathetic activity. This detrusor muscle contracts and the internal sphincter relaxes, as we have already discussed. Then urine passes down into the proximal urethra. Afferent information is given to the spinal cord. Afferent impulse reaches the higher centers in the brain through the spinothalamic tract. So hope you have understood regarding this micturition reflex. Here this is the bladder, urinary bladder. Actually this urine will be, which is formed in the kidneys, enters the ureters, and from there into the bladder. And this bladder, you have to remember, this is made up of a very specialized muscle which is termed as a detrusor muscle. And this has got innervations. It receives supplies from the this is the most important, parasympathetic. Parasympathetic activity. Micturition reflex is being carried out by the parasympathetics, which has got sensory as well as the motor components. Whenever this is being filled up, what happens? So this information, stretch receptors, this information will be carried to the sacral part of the spinal cord, that is S2, S3 and the S4. From here, the information again is relayed to the bladder and also to the internal sphincter. So it causes contraction of this bladder muscle as well as a relaxation of the internal sphincter. The other one, the other supply, nerve supply, is by the sympathetics. This is responsible for filling of the bladder. As it causes, this is from the L1, L2, L3. So these from the lumbar region of the spinal cord, and this causes relaxation. This is through the hypogastric nerve. Parasympathetic is through the pelvic nerve, and this is the hypogastric nerve. This causes relaxation of the bladder as well as a contraction of the internal sphincter. So this is termed as a nerve of filling, and this is the nerve of micturition. And this external sphincter, this is being supplied by the pudendal, which is a pudendal nerve, which is a somatic nerve. So whenever this is, all these activities are being modified by the higher centers in the brain, that is the pontine region, and also in the midbrain. Pontine region, you have the facilitatory center, and in the midbrain you have got the inhibitory center. So whenever micturition act has to take place, this is voluntary act. Whenever you want to void, then this relaxation of the external sphincter also has to take place. That information is being passed by the corticospinal tracts. So being modified by the higher centers, that is in the pons as well as in the midbrain. Hope you have understood regarding this micturition reflex. These are the different images showing this same. This is sympathetic through the hypogastric nerves, and parasympathetics is supplying this bladder as well as the internal sphincter by means of the pelvic nerves, and this external sphincter is under voluntary control, which is being supplied by the pudendal nerve, which is a somatic nerve. So this image we have discussed. Here you have seen this parasympathetic sensory component as well as a motor component, and this information is being passed to the higher centers, and also you get information to this external sphincter as well. So now coming, what is this? This is a image, a spotter, which shows the different quadrants of the abdomen. So there are 9 quadrants in this abdomen. So on seeing this, you have to make out. So this is the right hypochondrium. This is the epigastric region. You have these quadrants, like 9 quadrants, based on these 2 vertical lines and 2 transverse lines. 2 vertical lines from the mid-clavicular lines, and the 2 transverse lines. One is the upper transverse line, which is drawn from the subcostal region, and the lower transverse line is from the iliac region. Okay, so these divide the abdomen into 9 quadrants. So here you have got this epigastric region, and these are the right hypochondrium. This is the left hypochondrium, and here you have the umbilical region, right lumbar, left lumbar, hypogastric region, left iliac region, as well as this is the right iliac region. So this is right iliac, left iliac. Remember, this is the right hypochondrium, left hypochondrium. This is the right lumbar. This is the left lumbar regions. All this, what are the different things which you can see structures in this right hypochondriac region. This is the right hypochondria, where you have different structures. This is important because while palpating the abdomen, you have to know in your clinical examination, when you palpate the abdomen as well as to elicit certain tenderness, which area tenderness is being elicited, all this you can come across by knowing this quadrants itself of the abdomen. So in this right hypochondriac region, what are the different structures which are present, you should be knowing. So the different structures which are present in the right hypochondriac region are the liver, gallbladder, small intestine, ascending colon, transverse colon, and the right kidney. So these are the different structures. Mostly you palpate for the liver anteriorly in this region. Palpation is done. Okay. So what are the different structures in the epigastric region? Esophagus, stomach, liver, pancreas, small intestine, transverse colon, spleen, right and the left kidneys and the ureters, and as well as the right and the left adrenal glands. These are the structures which are present in the epigastric region. And what are the other structures present in this is the left hypochondriac region, left hypochondriac which comes below the ribs, costal cartilage. So these are the structures which are present in the left hypochondriac region. Those are the stomach, liver, hip, pancreas, tail, small intestine, transverse colon, descending colon, spleen, left kidney. So mostly in the right hypochondriac, remember about the liver, gallbladder. These are the structures you palpate for the liver in this region. And from the posterior side, you look for this kidney, right kidney. And here in the epigastric region, you look for the stomach. And in the left hypochondriac region, you will be palpating for the left hypochondriac region. Mostly it is for the anteriorly you palpate the stomach and posteriorly the left kidney. So as well as the spleen. Here in the umbilicus, this is the umbilical region. Umbilical region, these are the structures present here. Stomach, pancreas, small intestine, transverse colon, that is the most important structures. Here in the right lumbar region, here you have the liver, gallbladder, small intestine, ascending colon, and the right kidney. Right kidney. So these are the structures which have to be noted down. And in the left lumbar region, you have the following structures which are the small intestine, descending colon, and the left kidney tip. Here, this is the right iliac region. Right iliac region. So what are these structures which are present here? Small intestine, appendix, cecum, ascending colon, right ovary, and the fallopian tubes. Here in the hypogastric region, these are the different structures present here, such as the small intestine, sigmoid colon, rectum, urinary bladder, right and the left ureters, and left iliac region. What are the structures here? Small intestine, descending colon, sigmoid colon. So most important structures, remember students, in the right hypochondriac region is most important for the liver. Liver, remember this part. Here you have the stomach and left hypochondriac region as well as for the stomach, and the right lumbar region, this is for the kidney, and the left lumbar region again for the kidney palpation. This is important. And here in the umbilical part, you have this transverse colon, which is important structure here. Right iliac region, these are the important structures are the appendix and the ascending colon. Whenever there is appendicitis, inflammation of the appendix, so appendicitis will be pain or the tenderness will be elicited in this right iliac fossa, and that will be referred to the umbilical region. So appendix is the most important structure which you have to remember in this area. Similarly, in the right hypochondriac, whenever you have liver enlargement, you can palpate, you can look for the, you can feel for that enlargement of the liver. And here in this epigastric, whenever there is burn, like heartburn, when the patient is suffering from GERD, the patient complains of pain in this particular area. That is why this area is important, epigastric region. And the right lumbar, the pain, whenever the stones are present in the kidneys, kidney stones or something, the patient will be complaining of pain in the right lumbar region, which descends down to the groin. The pain starts in the lumbar region and it will be referred to the groin. So left lumbar as well, the kidney problems, all the kidney problems will be elicited in this area. And the left iliac region, all these descending colon, sigmoid colon, any all this relating to this inflammatory bowel disorders. Okay, these give rise to pain in this particular area. So this clinically knowing these areas is very, very important. Whenever the patient complains of pain or tenderness, what are the structures in these areas you have to remember, and which area, why the patient is complaining. Immediately as soon as the patient complains of pain or the tenderness in this particular area and this being referred to the umbilical region, you should be suspecting of some appendicitis. And if the patient complains of pain in this left inguinal region, you should be suspecting relating to the large intestine problems. The patient must be having some problems related to the large intestine. And if the patient complaints of pain in this area, that is the left lumbar, right lumbar regions, kidney problems, what are renal problems, that should be, you should be suspecting such problems related to the kidney. And when the patient complains of pain in this region, that is in the left hypochondriac, splenic problems, immediately spleen, you should think the problems which are related to the spleen. As well as if the patient complains of pain in the epigastric region, this area is mostly related to the esophagus and the stomach. So all these structures you have to remember, which are very important clinically. These are during the examination of the patient, abdomen examination of the patient, all these are important. Now coming to this next quarter, which shows what can you guess from this. As you all know, this is regarding the pressure volume changes of the cardiac cycle. Cardiac cycle, as you all know. So these are the events which take place in the cardiac cycle. One cardiac cycle to the other, heartbeat to the other heartbeat. So now I'll tell you all these, what are these different depictions which are being shown here. This is the ECG, that is the electrocardiogram picture which is being shown here. This is a phonocardiogram which is shows the heart sounds. Okay, heart sounds first, second, and the third. Electrocardiogram which shows the PQRST waves. And this is regarding this. This is regarding the ventricular volumes. Ventricular volumes. Okay, and this is the atrial pressure. This line is the black one, shows the atrial pressures, and this is the blue one which shows the blue line. These are the ventricular pressures. Ventricular pressures. This is the ventricular pressure, blue one shown in blue, ventricular pressures. And this is the aortic pressure, black one, which is touching this. Black one shows the aortic pressure. So what do you know about this cardiac cycle? As you all know, this consists of cardiac cycle consists of systole and diastole. Okay, so contraction phases systole and the relaxation phases diastole. So let us begin with the atrial contraction. What happens during atrial contraction? This is atrial contraction, P wave. This begins with the P wave. During the P wave, what happens? Atrial contraction occurs. Then what happens? Blood will be pushed into the ventricles. So blood will be going into the ventricles. That is how you see this ventricular filling. Ventricular volume is being increased. So this is the filling of the ventricles. When this ventricular volume, this increases, the pressure as well increases, right? So this volume is increasing, as well as this picture which shows this lines, ventricular pressure as well will be increased. So when this ventricular pressure outranges this aortic pressure, what happens here? The semilunar valves, that is the aortic valve, opens here. In this picture, it is this point. Aortic valve will be opened and the blood will be ejected into the ejection phase. This is the ejection phase. What happens? Blood will be ejected into the aorta. So here, rapid ejection phase. This is the slow ejection phase. 70% blood will be ejected through the during this rapid ejection, and 30% during the slow ejection phase. So the pressure, once it has gone, the blood has gone into the aorta, what is happening? The volume decreases, right? The volume in the left ventricle decreases. Left ventricular volume is being decreased, as well as the pressure. Left ventricular pressure, this is the blue line, as I already told you. So the pressure will be decreasing. The pressure comes down. Okay, when the pressure is coming down, what happens? Aortic valve closure occurs here. At this juncture, aortic valve closes. The pressure is decreasing, and this phase is the phase of isovolumic relaxation. Here, there will be no change in the ventricular size. Okay, the blood, very little blood will be staying in the ventricles, and the chamber size doesn't change. This is the phase of isovolumetric relaxation. So isovolumic relaxation. So this is the QRS. Here, when ventricle is being, there is a blood in this, depolarization of the ventricles occurs, and when the blood is gone out of the into the aorta and there is no blood, this is the phase of repolarization, which is being shown in the electrocardiogram. Okay. Once again, this is easy if you know all the phases. So systole and the diastole, atrial systole, mostly we compare that of the left atrium and the left, we take into account left atrium as well as the left ventricle. So this is atrial contraction. Atrial, this is the JVP, A, C, V and Y. These are depicted, these will be shown in the JVP, jugular venous pulse. So atrial contraction, what happens? Atrial depolarization. So this is contracting, atrium is contracting. So P wave is being produced. What happens? Blood is being going into the ventricles. That is how the blood in the ventricles is being increased, right? Here the blood is increasing. This is the ventricular volume curve, which is being shown here. So this is ventricular volume is being increased. When the ventricular volume is being increased, automatically the ventricular pressure will be increased. Here, this is the phase of isovolumetric contraction. What happens at this phase? When the blood has come into the ventricles totally, when the blood has reached into the ventricles, what happens? Yeah, AV valves, atrioventricular valves, they close, and the blood, AV valves have been closed and the semilunar valves are closed. So what happens? The pressure will be generating in the ventricular size, but with no change in the chamber size, That is why this phase is termed as isovolumetric contraction. This is the isovolumic contraction. Okay, this is isovolumic contraction. This is ventricular depolarization. Now the ventricles have to contract. So this is ventricular contraction, ventricular depolarization, showing the QRS complex. Once this ventricular pressure, which exceeds the aortic pressure, which is about 80 mm of Hg, here you can see the aortic pressure is about 80 mm of Hg. So once this ventricular pressure exceeds that of the aortic pressure, what happens? These semilunar valves, that is the aortic valve here, it will be opened. Okay, aortic valve, here it is shown. Aortic valve opens. So aortic valve will be opened and blood will be pushed from the ventricles into the, that is the left ventricle into the aorta. Okay, left ventricle into the aorta. Blood is being pushed. So once this is the ejection phase. This is the ejection phase, rapid ejection phase, slow ejection phase. So once the blood is going out from the ventricles into the aorta, what happens? The volume decreases. Volume in the ventricles is decreasing. This is a graph showing this volume, right? Blood has been ejected here. Blood has been the pressure when it out process this aortic pressure. What is happening? Blood is being ejected. So blood is coming down in the ventricles. Ventricular volume will be decreased. So volume is decreasing in the ventricles. And what happens once this blood which has gone into the aorta, that blood, due to the stretching of the aorta, what happens? It causes closure of the aortic valve. Here you see this aortic valve closure occurs. So aortic valve will be closed here. So what happens? The remaining blood, whatever little amount of the blood is remaining in the ventricles. This phase is the isovolumetric relaxation, where you can see the ventricles depolarizing and you can see the T wave in the electrocardiogram, that is the ECG. Okay, so T wave in the ECG, E wave at atrial systole, QRS during ventricular depolarization, T wave during ventricular repolarization. So this is the electrocardiogram, this is the ventricular volume, this is the ventricular pressure, and this is the aortic pressure. This is the aortic pressure which is being shown here. And in the phonocardiogram, you have the first heart sound whenever there is closure of the AV valves, AV, atrioventricular valves. This closure of the AV valves, you know, as you know, this produces the first heart sound. And closure of the semilunar valves, closure of the semilunar valves gives rise to the second heart sound. And whenever there is filling of the atrium, blood in the atria, this gives rise to the third heart sound, which can be depicted on this phonocardiogram. So these are the pressure volume changes which are being shown in the cardiac cycle. And that is how you have to speak. Like this is the image which will be given in your examination. This picture will be shown to you and you will have to identify it as the pressure volume changes of the cardiac cycle. Hope you have understood this, pressure volume changes of the cardiac cycle. Okay, these are the, so cardiac cycle, what is cardiac cycle? Now coming, consists of the atrial systole and the diastole, ventricular systole and the diastole. What are the major events in the atrial systole? This atrial systole, it begins from the peak of P wave and ends with the peak of QRS complex. Ventricular volume, during this phase, what is happening? Ventricular volume increases mildly. Atrial pressure rises due to atrial contraction, producing the A wave in the JVP. Atrial pressure exceeds the ventricular pressure. Fourth heart sound is recorded in the phonocardiogram. This is produced by inrush of blood into the ventricle. Mitral valve closes at the end of the atrial systole with ventricular pressure exceeding the atrial pressure. So what is happening in diastole? Atrial diastole, atrial filling occurs at the beginning of ventricular systole. Bulging of the atrioventricular valve into the atrium results in the increase in the atrial pressure, which gives rise to the C wave in the JVP. Venous return increases atrial volume and increases atrial pressure, which produces V wave in JVP. So these are the different things to freshen up you. Actually, okay, as you all know, the systole, atrial systole and the diastole. So atrial systole, contraction is occurring, and that gives the A wave in the JVP, ventricular systole, and the blood will be coming out from the atria into the ventricles through the AV valves. Okay, ventricular systole, phase of isovolumetric contraction. Appearance of QRS complex in the ECG heralds the onset of systole. This phase starts with the closure of mitral valve and ends with opening of the aortic valve. Ventricular volume remains same throughout this phase. In spite of forceful contraction, ventricular size remains same. That is why this phase is termed as isometric type of contraction. And major events in this phase are, this phase starts from the peak of QRS complex in the ECG. First heart sound appears in phonocardiogram. Ventricular pressure rises abruptly from 0 to 80 millimeters of mercury in left ventricle and to 8 millimeters of mercury in right ventricle. Valves of the heart remain closed. Rise in ventricular pressure occurs abruptly. Phase of ventricular ejection. You have the rapid ejection phase. Okay, with opening of the aortic valve, aortic blood flow increases abruptly and blood is ejected forcefully into the aorta from the left ventricle. And you have the other phase, that is the reduced ejection phase. Here, what are the events? Here, the ventricular and the aortic pressure decrease, but aortic pressure exceeds the ventricular pressure. Aortic blood flow is greatly reduced. Ventricular volume is further decreased. Atrial pressure continues to increase slowly due to blood returning to the atria, and T wave appears here. Ventricular diastole. This is phase of ventricular relaxation. Here, rapid fall in the ventricular pressure. No changes in the ventricular volume occur. Aortic blood flow is almost nil. Second heart sound appears in the first half of this phase. Atrial pressure continues to rise and the peak of the V wave of JVP appears towards the end of this phase. Phase of ventricular filling, you have the rapid filling phase. This phase starts with the opening of mitral valve, which corresponds to the peak of V wave in JVP. Rapid increase in ventricular volume, decrease in ventricular and the atrial pressure. Third heart sound appears in phonocardiogram in the initial part. This is the diastasis, slow rise in ventricular volume, no change in the left atrial, left ventricular and the aortic pressures. In ECG, P wave begins to appear towards the end of this phase. That is for refreshment. What are the different phases of the cardiac cycle? As you all know, this was refreshment, but here, as I told you, these are the pressure volume changes which are occurring in the cardiac cycle. What is happening in atrial systole, when this AV valve opens, when the AV valve closes, how is the volume in the ventricles, whether it's increasing or decreasing, what is happening to the volume in the ventricles. And this ECG, as you all know, this shows the different waves. Here the P wave, QRS complex, T wave, and here the pressures. How are the pressures in the ventricles, that is whether the pressure is being increased or falling. During the different phases, it increases accordingly and as well as it falls accordingly. And this is the aortic pressure. Hope you have understood this. This is the pressure volume changes of the cardiac cycle. Okay, begin with this ECG, you will be understanding better atrial contraction, ventricular depolarization and ventricular repolarization. What is happening in atrial contraction? Here, as I told you, what happens during atrial contraction? Blood flows into the ventricles. That is how the volume of the blood in the ventricles is being increased. So accordingly, you can guess the rest of the parts. So what is this showing? This is the milk ejection reflex. This milk ejection reflex is a neuroendocrinal reflex. So what happens? The stretch receptors which are present in the nipple. So suckling by the baby, this causes this information, okay, will be passed to the posterior pituitary. Through the, this will be passed to the posterior pituitary through how? Through the spinal cord, then from the spinal cord to the hypothalamus, hypothalamus to the posterior pituitary, and from the posterior pituitary, hormone, major hormone which is being released is the oxytocin. Oxytocin. This oxytocin, it causes contraction of the myoepithelial cells, and that is how milk will be ejected as a contraction of the myoepithelial cells surrounding the alveoli, and the milk will be ejected from the alveoli into the ducts. So this release of oxytocin is very important, which is responsible for this milk letdown reflex or the milk ejection reflex, which is ejection or the expulsion of the milk from the lactiferous ducts. Okay, so the other hormone, so which is responsible for this reflex is a prolactin. Prolactin, what happens? Anterior pituitary releases prolactin inhibiting factor. Normally it is under inhibition, inhibitory control. So whenever this suckling reflex occurs, what happens? This inhibition will be released and the will be gone. That inhibition will be gone, and that is how prolactin will be released into the bloodstream, and this reaches and this facilitates the milk ejection. Okay, two hormones are responsible for the milk ejection or the milk letdown reflex. That is, one is oxytocin, the other one is the prolactin. So what is the major mechanism is the stretch receptors which are present in the nipple. They will be stimulated when the baby suckles. So this afferent impulse will be carried to the spinal cord, from the spinal cord to the hypothalamus, from the hypothalamus to the posterior pituitary as well as to the anterior pituitary. Remember, from the posterior pituitary, you have this oxytocin release, okay, which causes contraction of the myoepithelial cells, and that is how milk will be ejected from the alveoli of this. And the other one from the anterior pituitary, prolactin, two hormones. Remember, prolactin and the oxytocin. So this is that is why this is termed as a neuroendocrinal reflex. Hormones as well as the nerves being involved. That is why it is termed as neuroendocrinal reflex. So what is the mechanism? When the baby suckles, sensory nerve endings or the receptors located in the skin of the areola and the nipple gets stimulated. Sensory impulses transmitted to the hypothalamus through the somatic nerves. Activation of hypothalamus causes release of oxytocin and prolactin from the pituitary gland. Oxytocin causes contraction of the myoepithelial cells, and that is how milk will be ejected. In cases of engorgement of the breast after delivery, oxytocin administration leads to free flow of milk. What are the inhibitors for the milk ejection? Major inhibitors of milk ejection are the alcohol, stress, and the pain. Sympathetic overstimulation of the sympathetic nervous system leads to inhibition of the milk ejection. So increases, what are the things which increase the oxytocin? That is how more milk will be produced. What are these? These are the stimulants. That is, one is a breast massage, nipple stimulation, hearing, seeing, smelling, or touching the baby also can elicit this reflex. Just by hearing the cry of the baby, okay, the seeing of the baby, okay, all these are the things which can increase the oxytocin release, as well as more milk will be produced. And positive emotions and impact massage, okay, breast massage, nipple stimulation. These are the things which increase the oxytocin release. Which what are the factors which decrease the oxytocin, that which contributes to the less milk, are the negative emotions, that is fear, worry, sadness, pain, cold, and alcohol. So remember this. Hope you have understood this part. Okay, now what is this? What is this? Hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system. So hypothalamus, this portal system beginning in the hypothalamus and ending in the pituitary. Hypothalamo-hypophyseal. Hypophyseal is pituitary gland. So hypophyseal portal system. So what is the importance of this hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system? Major is here, this is a true portal system as it starts with capillaries and ends with capillaries without passing the heart. That is why this is one set of a true portal system. Why it is present here? The major significance of this portal system, whatever are the hormones which are being produced in the anterior pituitary, they will be traversing down. They will be traversing from the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary in high concentration. High concentration. Remember this point. The concentration, high concentration will be achieved through this portal system. Hypothalamic. Remember, this portal system starts in the hypothalamus. What is happening? Hypothalamus, you have the different hormones being synthesized in the hypothalamus. They have to be transported down to the pituitary, right, which is termed as the hypophysis. So that is why this portal system carries all those hormones from the hypothalamus to the pituitary through these portal vessels. Remember this. What are the hormones which are being secreted in the hypothalamus? You know, all the releasing hormones, that is GH, RH, growth hormone releasing hormone, TRH, thyroid releasing hormone, CRH, such as the corticotropin releasing hormone. And these hormones which are being synthesized here, they have to reach here to the pituitary. Okay. From the pituitary, these eosinophils, basophils, different cells will be there, and they will get stimulated and they release again the different hormones. But the stimulation of these pituitary cells, okay, from where the pituitary hormones have to be released. So these hormones which are being synthesized in the hypothalamus have to traverse down to the anterior pituitary through these blood vessels, that is the capillaries. So hypothalamus is, that is termed as a hypophyseal is a pituitary portal system. So hypothalamus is connected to the anterior pituitary by means of the blood vessels, portal hypophyseal vessels, and it is connected to the posterior pituitary by means of the neurons, with posterior pituitary through the neurons, hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract, okay, portal hypophyseal vessels. The blood vessels arise from capillaries on the ventral surface of the hypothalamus, primary capillary plexus, which are the branches of the superior hypophyseal artery. The releasing hormones secreted from the hypothalamus, where they are synthesized, as I already told you, the different hormones which are being synthesized in the hypothalamus, such as a growth hormone releasing hormone, TRH, thyroid releasing hormone, many hormones. Okay, these reach the anterior pituitary. So these are termed as a hypophysiotropic hormones synthesized in the parvocellular neurons. So the other one is the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. This is a connection of the hypothalamus with the posterior pituitary. Connection between the hypothalamus and the posterior pituitary is the neural. And here the neurons, as the neurons, what are the hormones being synthesized here? One is ADH, the other is as I already told you, it is a oxytocin. These neurons which synthesize these hormones are very large in size. That is why they are termed as a magnocellular neurons. Axons arise from these cell bodies and descend to terminate on the capillary bed in the posterior pituitary. Because of neural origin and connection, posterior pituitary known as a neurohypophysis. So hope you have understood these portals. Hope you can recognize these. So this is the one showing the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system. Okay, portal tract. This is the posterior pituitary with the connection with the posterior hypothalamus with the posterior pituitary is termed as a hypophyseal portal tract. Okay, so the hormones which are being synthesized, they reach the pituitary through by means of the vessels or by means of the tract. Okay, so this what can you guess from this? This is a picture showing the differences between the cortical and the medullary nephrons. Okay, so cortical, what are the differences between the cortical and medullary nephrons? This cortical nephron, it is located in the superficial region of the cortex, whereas the juxtamedullary nephron, this is located in the juxtamedullary region of the cortex. And cortical nephron, these constitute about 85% of the total, and the juxtamedullary nephrons, they constitute about 15% of the total. Loop of Henle, here in this length is short, here it is long. Okay, the differences you have to know. Length of the thin limb of the loop of the Henle, here it's short, and thin ascending limb is almost absent. This you have to remember. Thin ascending limb is almost absent. Here the size of the glomerulus is small, whereas the length of the thin limb of the loop of Henle, it is longer, and thin limb has both the ascending as well as the descending parts. Here the size of the glomerulus is large. Okay, so this is a cortical nephron showing here. This is a juxtamedullary nephron. Okay, this loop of Henle has got the thin ascending limb as well as a thick ascending limb. So this is a juxtamedullary, this is a cortical nephrons. And cortical nephron rate of the filtration is slow. Here juxtamedullary nephron, it is high. Efferent arteriole, it forms a peritubular capillaries, it forms a peritubular capillaries and the vasa recta. Efficacy in concentrating urine is less, here it is more. So this is major function of this cortical nephron. What is the major function of the urine formation and excretion of the waste products? And here what is the function is juxtamedullary nephron. It is urine concentrating. So remember this. These are the urine concentration. Okay, concentration will be done by this juxtamedullary nephrons, whereas by this cortical nephron, it is urine formation and excretion of the waste products. Here renin content is more, and here the renin content is less. So these are the major differences between the two nephrons, that is the cortical nephron as well as the juxtamedullary nephrons. Okay, so where are they situated? Situation, location is important. How much they constitute? How is the thin limb of the loop of Henle? How is it length? What are its functions? How is the size of the glomerulus? All these you have to note down. Okay, so today we have seen all these spotters. Once again, what are the different spotters which you have seen? Are they? One is this from the beginning. Once again, just for refreshment. So this is a micturition reflex being carried out mainly by the parasympathetics. Remember, this micturition reflex is a parasympathetic activity as it causes the contraction of the detrusor muscle and the relaxation of the internal sphincter. That is why this parasympathetic is termed as the nerve of micturition, whereas the sympathetics, this is called as the nerve of filling, as it comes from the hypogastric nerve and it causes the relaxation of the detrusor muscle and as well as it causes contraction of the internal sphincter. And here you have the voluntarily being controlled by means of the external sphincter, which is being supplied by the pudendal nerve, which is a somatic nerve. So that is how the micturition reflex takes place. And the second one, these are the different quadrants of the abdomen which you have to remember. This one showing the epigastric region, right hypochondriac region, left hypochondriac region. This is the umbilical region, right lumbar, left lumbar region. This is a hypogastric region, and here is the right iliac fossa, left iliacosa. Why they are important? What are the different contents? What are the different structures present in these areas, locations? Why this is important? Clinical aspect, this is very important. Whenever the patient elicits in that particular area, you have to suspect you have to come to a diagnosis immediately. What could it be? Like whether it is a liver disorder or a GI tract disturbance, what is it? Whether related to the kidney problems, renal problems, what is it? This gives you a picture. Okay, the diagnosing the different diseases can be known only by knowing these regions. So as I told you, the different structures, and this is, as I told you, these are the different pressure volume changes of the cardiac cycle. This I have told you already. So pressure volume changes of the cardiac cycle, and this is the milk ejection reflex or the milk leg down reflex, as I told you. Here it is a neuroendocrine reflex, as it being carried out by the nerves as well as by the hormones, that is the oxytocin, most important hormones which play a role in this milk ejection of the milk let down reflex are the oxytocin and the prolactin, which cause ejection of the milk. Okay, so suckling is the most important stimulus. Remember this, you just have to remember suckling stimulus that being carried to the hypothalamus, from the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary as well as the posterior pituitary, and the release of the hormones such as the oxytocin and the prolactin. So just by seeing this, you can easily make out that this is a hypothalamus, this is a pituitary, hypophyseal portal system, being the connection with the anterior pituitary, and connection with the posterior pituitary is through the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal tract. Okay, nerve endings, nerve terminal endings which are taking part here. The hormones, different hormones, right? In the hypothalamus, what are the different hormones which are being synthesized, and they travel down through these capillaries into the anterior pituitary through this plexus. Okay, so the other one is the differences between the cortical nephrons and the juxtamedullary nephrons, right? Thank you. Thank you, students, for listening to this lecture. Okay, see you.